You are listening to a podcast from Antioch University, Seattle, a leader in social justice education. Welcome to the second podcast in the Teaching Crisis and Conflict series sponsored by Antioch University, Seattle's Independent Learning Program. My name is Daniel Cords. I am a fourth-year student at Antioch pursuing a liberal arts degree in human development and learning and social justice studies. Today I will be discussing eugenics in America, how the United States inspired the Nazis. The eugenics movement was born primarily in thanks to a man named Sir Francis Galton, a cousin of Charles Darwin, who is often referred to as the father of eugenics. In one of his first publications, Hereditary Genius, published in 1869, Galton describes a positive correlation between what he offensively refers to as feeble-minded individuals and certain groups within the population. Now, many of the students in this class will acknowledge that the first rule learned in any social science class or in any class working with research is that correlation does not equal causation. And yet Galton ignores this rule and publishes conclusions that reflect his prejudiced assumptions that people like him are superior to others. Galton's theories stem from what is referred to as biological determinism, which states that nature, biology, alone determines a person's development. For Galton, this meant that genetic inheritance alone determined the development of an individual. He further suggests that individuals with unfavorable qualities are born that way and are therefore genetically inferior. The implication associated with this theory is that those with unfavorable qualities cannot change and are therefore hopeless and helpless. Moreover, a theory rooted in biological determinism relies on genetic inheritance and therefore suggests that reproduction would hinder the human race through the persistent reproduction of unfavorable qualities. In this mindset, genetics become a threat to the evolutionary fitness of our species, or what is later classified as the American race. Galton responds to this threat in his book Hereditary Genius through his classification of eugenics as being the studies of agencies under social control that improve or impair the racial qualities of future generations, either physically or mentally. Three factors primarily inspired the eugenics movement in the United States: industrialization, migration, and immigration. As industry grew, so too did the promise of jobs. Immigrants flocked to the United States looking for work, and similarly, Americans left their farms for the city, equally hoping to find lucrative work. The reality was, however, that the rapidly increasing urban population outnumbered the employment and housing resources. This paved the way for a serious social crisis, which resulted in widespread poverty. The social problems raged on, and like today, so too did the debate over how social problems should be resolved. This period is known as the Progressive Era, an era in which the debate over social welfare programs turned to science to eradicate deficient areas of society. Because so much of the population came from farms, eugenics science looked to pedigree studies, making assumptions through racial prejudice that degeneracy was multigenerational and therefore could be outbred. To quote Galton, "Natural selection had ceased in the civilized world and could not move forward without human intervention." With this in mind, the United States began to enact eugenics laws that would prevent the reproduction of those perceived as deficient. The eugenics movement in California was among the strongest, and as far as our records can tell, 20,000 of the 60,000 sterilizations that were documented occurred in California. One of the key figures in the eugenics movement within the United States was David Starr Jordan, former president of Stanford University. Jordan authored Blood of the Nation, a scientific publication written for a non-scientific audience about biological determinism and the eugenics movement as an act of national security. The publication was so popular that it gained the attention of Germans who became interested in California's new streamlined approach to sterilizations. The Blood of the Nation appealed to the population with pedigree studies that suggested that deficient qualities could be outbred, creating a perfect human race, much like the pedigree studies farmers used to cultivate the perfect crop. This became very popular and gained the attention and support of many wealthy organizations. The Carnegie Institute, for example, began studying eugenics in depth and even built a special lab dedicated to eugenic science. Primary research conducted at this lab examined ways to reduce deficient qualities within the population. A report that was published with the American Breeders Association listed 10 points for eugenic cleansing, the 8th point of which was euthanasia. The Harriman Railroad fortune sought to eradicate deficiency through nonprofit organizations, especially those who worked with immigrants. Among those targeted for deportation, confinement, and forced sterilization were Jews, Italians, and other immigrants in crowded cities. The Rockefeller Foundation was among the most notorious donors, donating what would have been millions in modern currency to German eugenics science. As a primary donor for German racial purification, the foundation worked directly with Josef Mengele, also known as the Angel of Death. The foundation donated a considerable amount to concentration camps, including Auschwitz. The involvement of the United States in German eugenics science is unavoidable. In Hitler's 1924 publication Mein Kampf, he clearly thanks the resources from the United States in regard to racial cleansing. He says, and I quote, "There is today one state in which at least weak beginnings toward a better conception of immigration are noticeable. Of course, it is not our model German Republic, but the United States." The United States rejoices that their science is being replicated in Germany, but they soon become jealous that the Germans become more efficient in racial cleansing. As the Richmond Times-Dispatch wrote in 1924, "The Germans are beating us at our own game." Upon the end of the war, after the world is exposed to the horror of Nazi racial cleansing, eugenics science is declared a crime against humanity. But despite being classified as a crime against humanity, the Supreme Court upholds the Commonwealth eugenics laws of Virginia in the case Buck v. Bell. A case involving Carrie Buck, a woman who was forcefully sterilized, and Dr. John H. Bell, who sterilized her. Bell claimed that it was unconstitutional for eugenic practices under the 14th Amendment. But Justice Oliver Wendell Holmes, both in Buck v. Bell and in later years, stated, "It is better for all the world if instead of waiting to execute degenerate offspring for crime or to let them starve for their imbecility, society can prevent those who are manifestly unfit from continuing their kind. Their generations of imbeciles are enough." This upheld eugenic laws in certain states up until 1974.
Round us all up, send us away. That's what you'd really like to do. But we're too strong, proud, unafraid. In fact, we almost pity you. You act from fear, why should that be? What is it that you're frightened of? The way that we dress, the way that we meet, the fact that you cannot destroy our love. We're going to win our rights to lavender days and nights. We're not afraid to be queer and different. If that means hell, well, hell will take the chance. They're also straight up, tight, upright, and rigid. They march in lockstep, we prefer to dance. We see a world of romance and of pleasure. All they can see is sheer banality. Lavender nights, our greatest treasure, where we can be just who we want to be.